Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bundesliga show brought to you by Over the Bar. Tuning in on Tuesday night for, a rarity, but for a one-off our yearly special, and very, very happy and delighted to be joined not only by Mark, who's just got off a lovely conference call, but with Matthew as well, Matthew Karagich from the 2.Bundesliga podcasts. Matthew, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Rory, Mark, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Excellent stuff. So, as I'm sure everyone's aware, we're going to be talking Zweite Bundesliga this evening. We try to do this kind of collaboration once a year. I can't recall actually if we did one last year, so it might be 2 years in the making. This meetup that we haven't done for a little while, but we love doing this because it helps everyone understand more about the second division, who are more casual viewers of the Bundesliga and German football, and it helps us to get an understanding of what's coming our way and what will be coming vice versa. So obviously we're going to have a load of questions basically for Matthew from mine and Mark's end. We'll go through as much as we can from title race, standout players to keep an eye out for, how our Bundesliga sides might get on in the second division once they're relegated. So loads to get through and enjoy. Obviously, before we do, if you can leave a thumbs up on the show, that would be absolutely fantastic. Be really appreciated. Obviously, if you've got any comments, thoughts, or questions for Matthew, pop them in as you're watching right now, and we can try and fire them his way also. And of course, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And of course, check out the brilliant 2.Bundesliga podcast. You can find it on X, and it's at 2.Bundesliga pod. We'll put it in the description as well, so you won't miss out anything Zweite Bundesliga wise. So let's get kick started, and we'll start with what is the title race and the race for promotion, Matthew. Time of recording now, we've got 4 games to go, like we do in the Bundesliga, and it looks like we've got 2 clear favourites at the moment for automatic promotion, and one more or less clear favourite for the third place spot, which is obviously the playoff spot. So we'll kickstart talking about Kiel and St. Pauli, and maybe have a little look at how they've gone on this season, and in terms of both teams have been pushing to be promoted for a long while now. Obviously Kiel being really close, and St. Pauli at times in the last few seasons. So what's made the difference this season, Matthew? Do you want to kickstart and just run us through both sides a little bit and how their journey this season has gone?
It was quite interesting. So if we start with Kiel, who are top of the pile, they've essentially been in the top 2 for a good chunk of the season. They entered the winter break on top, and after St. Pauli went undefeated during the Hinrunde. And it's really been, survival by committee for Kiel. They've had plenty of injuries throughout the season. They don't have like a clear goal scorer, but guys like Steven Skripski, Shuto Machino, who they signed in the summer from Shonan Bellmare in the J League. Jan Fietz Arp has had like a little purple patch. It's been like a mix of players who have come in, found a way to gel together, because entering the season, there was a lot of uncertainty about the direction of this team, and Coach Marcel Rapp was under a little bit of pressure to help find an identity that was going to work for this team going forward. And really, they've had some incredible performances. Guys like Lewis Holtby, who was sent off on the weekend, but he's had a bit of a career resurgence, along with captain Philipp Zander, arguably one of the better duos midfield-wise, along with what St. Pauli have with Irvine and Hartzell. And it's really culminated in a lot of improvement. They've kept the offensive intensity and goal scoring that they had from last season, but they are significantly a better defensive team than they have been over the last few seasons. And you look at where they've come over the last 12 months, and it's pretty clear that they've found a defensive identity that works. They've got guys like Kleiner Beckel, who's unfortunately out until November, but he was one of the risers that they got, that they found throughout the season. And really, they're just an impressive unit of guys who have this next man up mentality. When they lose a player, next person comes in and does a role, and that was very obvious throughout. Being able to watch them on Saturday against Hamburg, that was exactly the impression I got seeing them in person for the very first time. But St. Pauli, they have been very close the last few seasons, and they improved quite a lot when Fabian Herzler took over the managerial role during the World Cup break, essentially. And then he won 10 of his first 10 games in charge, and really they've kept that momentum, but they've really not made too many changes to the team as a whole. Herzler typically favors his guys, the main starting 11, and they play a pretty similar system to what Kiel does, that 3 at the back with a ball carrying defender. They've got Hartl and Jackson Irvine in a very good midfield role. But they've also got guys like Alyosha Kemline, who's on loan from Union Berlin. And the thought process with him is that he's too good for this division. And he was fantastic on the weekend against Hanover, playing in that midfield with Irvine and having Hartl playing as an attacking winger. So their versatility does make them quite difficult to match up against. And they've, despite having, their top scorer is Hartl with 16, they still have a striker in Eggestein who mightn't be the most potent goal scorer, but he does as was once put to me, he does exactly what is needed, which is, fill the space, control the ball, provides the wide options, whether it's Metcalf, Sard or Afolayan, and just when your chance arrives, just take it. So they've been, they've got less goals than several of the teams around them, but they're an excellent defensive unit, and when the opportunities have presented to them this season, they've been able to take them.
Yeah, same pattern. So, what are the major differences, would you say, between Pauli and Kiel this season? Like you said, maybe Pauli have scored a couple less goals, and obviously Fortuna Dusseldorf, by the looks of it, have got quite a lot of firepower, basically, because they have the best goal difference in the division. So, are both teams, Kiel and St. Pauli, kind of starting off with that bedrock in terms of that solid back lines, and they build from that?
Absolutely. And look, you can't put a price on good goalkeeping, and that's coming from an ex-goalkeeper. And both Timon Weiner and Nikolai Vasil have been pretty strong throughout the season. And one of the big question marks heading into this season for Kiel was, what was the goalkeeping situation going to be like? Thomas Dana has typically been the number one for quite a while. And over the last few seasons, they've gone through several names that have not really been able to solidify themselves as the true number one. But Weiner has had a pretty strong season, being the number one. And then you look at Vasil, and he's been pretty much a stalwart since he arrived several seasons ago. And yeah, look, you look at all the teams in the top half, and you can see where goalkeepers can make a difference. But absolutely having that strong defensive front really, that's where you start. The classic saying of that, offense wins you games and defense wins you championships. It does ring very true, even in football circles. And, these two teams are two of the best defensive units in the league. And there's a good starting point as to why they are positions 1 and 2 in the 2.Bundesliga.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, I'll let you come in with a question in a moment, maybe about Fortuna, because that's obviously the other side that we have in this promotion race, and we can maybe talk a little bit about poor old Hamburg as well. But just before we do, in terms of how equipped these two teams are for the big step up, because so Pauli are in second, are 5 points ahead of Dusseldorf with 4 games to go. If we look at their run-ins, Kiel look like they might be able to get the job done in the next couple of games because they look quite presentable fixtures. So if we're anticipating and assuming, which is a dangerous thing to do in football, of course, maybe even if we can compare them with Darmstadt and Heidenheim this year, like, how do they match up? How prepared do you feel that Kiel and St. Pauli are?
I would say they're definitely better equipped than Darmstadt are. It's kind of an interesting one. I think St. Pauli, who play really nice football. Same with Kiel. The biggest thing that they need to do when entering the Bundesliga really is, bring that similar mentality that you see teams like Heidenheim enter the league with, and that's the saying "eat grass," and it's really about work rate and Doing the basics, really. That's how teams can better equip themselves. I think, both of these teams, I would probably say St. Pauli might be a little bit better equipped, just in terms of like a squad building standpoint and individual quality. But it's still going to be a challenge. You look at how many teams can survive the first season in the Bundesliga from promotion. I mean, Darmstadt we've seen will go down. Fürth are typically another one and done team. But you look at teams like Bochum, for example, who are trying to buck the trend. Bielefeld was 2 seasons. Schalke was a one and done. So it's, look, the biggest challenge entering the new season, should they get promoted, will be to survive. And it's not particularly easy when you've got teams who have been able to avoid relegation for so long. Teams like Augsburg, who have had a resurgence. Teams like Mainz. You look at teams like Wolfsburg, who are struggling. Gladbach, who feels like they're a season or two away from being in some peril. Werder Bremen also in the same camp, and they only gained promotion a couple of seasons ago. So they will definitely be in a gaggle of teams that will be in the relegation battle for the first season. But as we've seen, Heidenheim have had a pretty impressive campaign. So it's not without the realm of possibility that these teams could surprise a few of the established stars.
Yeah, so obviously, presuming that obviously Holstein Kiel and St. Pauli are going to get promoted, which I think most people would probably imagine right now, with obviously 5 and 6 points clear of third, respectively. So that brings us on to that third place promotion spot, doesn't it? Obviously, the playoff spot, the team that plays the side that finished third from bottom in the Bundesliga, which looks pretty open at the minute, doesn't it? Obviously, Fortuna Düsseldorf currently in there on 55.6 points now, ahead of Hamburger SV, who, obviously in their 6th season in this Zweite Bundesliga, you just can't believe it. They just don't seem to know how to get promoted at all, do they? Obviously, they had a poor result against Holstein Kiel at the weekend as well, in that the match that was being billed as the kind of top spiel in that division at the weekend. So, yeah, I have a few questions about these teams for you, Matt. I mean, obviously, first of all, Fortuna Düsseldorf, who myself and Peter are actually lucky enough to see live on Saturday as well. We saw the game against Greuther in the stadium. So, I mean, what have you made of them? Because, I mean, on Saturday, they weren't particularly impressive, if I'm being honest with you. I mean, that wasn't a great performance. They were lucky to win the game through that goal from Vincent Vermey, which was actually a good finish, but it was pretty much the only chance he created that particular day. So what have you made of them? Because obviously they've scored 64 goals this season, the top scorers in the league. Do you think they would be good enough to win a potential playoff? And just give us a bit of a rundown on how you feel about them at the minute.
It's kind of an interesting one, because if you look at 6 weeks ago, you would probably say that they were pushing the proverbial, and it was not looking likely that they were going to be in a position for the playoff. But 6 straight wins will completely change how people, including myself, will perceive the situation. And look, they've hit on some signings. I mean, Christos Solis has been absolutely fantastic, and look, regardless of what happens at the end of the season, it's probably going to be really difficult to keep him. He returns to Norwich in the summer, and Norwich might do one of two things. They might want to keep him for a championship campaign or sell him to the highest bidder. And, I would love to see him play in German football again, because I think he's got the attributes to play in the division. But it's just one of those situations where he's just really adapted to life in Germany quite well. And it almost seems as if the team understands how to get the best out of him. Season overall has been pretty solid. I mean, they've scored a ton of goals, which has been the catalyst as to where they are. They defend quite well. And they're another team that has had a lot of injuries at the defensive end. Guys like Andre Hoffman, they've had, Jordi de Wijs. On the weekend, they were playing Jamil Siebert and Tim Oberdorf. And, they were okay. They were under a lot of pressure early on. I thought Fürth in that game were actually not that bad. I thought they were pretty unlucky not to get a penalty early on in the first half. And it looked like a handball. And, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And it looked like it hit the arms of Oberdorf. And it was a pretty great surprise to see that was overturned by the video assistant referee. And, had Furt taken the lead in the game, we might have seen a completely different outcome. That's all hypothetical and in the past. But, look, under Tune, they're a pretty reactive team. They typically see what their opponent is trying to do and create solutions around that. And look, they were pretty patient in creating opportunities. And, what separates the good teams from the great teams is their ability to finish opportunities. And it's a good reason why they made such a deep run in the Pokal as well to make the semi-finals. So, as a team, they're a pretty solid unit. They've got a pretty strong midfield, guys like Johansson, who they signed in the summer, guys like Engelhardt, Tanaka, who we don't know if he'll be there at the end of the season. There's a good chance he'll probably be on the move to a Bundesliga club. So they've got a pretty good squad. They've got some experience. They've got some impressive young players. And overall, if they can finish third, I think it's definitely where they hope to be. The question of who they would hope to play, given how open the playoffs is, I would at the moment, looking at all the teams that are in the mix, Bochum seems like the team that I would want to play. They look extremely vulnerable at the moment, and even though they were pretty unlucky against Wolfsburg on the weekend, if I was a betting man, which I'm not, that's who I would think would be the team that I would want to play and become one of the very few teams from the Zweite Bundesliga to win the promotion playoff battle.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously it will be a Nord Rhine-Westphalen derby as well. Obviously the two teams only about, I think, 50 kilometers or so apart. So that would be some encounter there at the Merkur-Spiel Arena. But yeah, I mean, the other team, as I've already mentioned, I wanted to get onto the kind of, the elephant in the room, which is HSV, isn't it? I mean, every single year they start off like a train in this Zweite Liga. You think they're going to walk promotion, and it just basically every single year they fall apart, don't they? And I mean, obviously this year the kind of fallout started a little bit earlier than normal. They had some great results early on in the season, battering the likes of Hertha Berlin. And once again, they were the Spitzenreiter very early on. They looked like a team that were going to go up, sixth time lucky, so to speak. But I mean, basically what's happened since probably December kind of time has just been a disaster really for them. And obviously bringing in Stefan Baumgart, which obviously got a lot of Bundesliga fans interested as well, a bit of a cult hero in Germany as well. Obviously he does have experience in the Zweite Liga as well with Paderborn, doesn't he? But I mean, what's gone wrong with them? Because I saw them play Nuremberg, and I think November, and they looked pretty good that day. They beat Nuremberg 2-0, as they normally do beat Nuremberg, to be fair. But what's happened to them? Because, I mean, they've got the squad, they've got the manager, so why can they never get promoted?
Well, you have to look at the start of the Rückrunde, and, 4 matches in, they sacked Tim Walter, and then a couple of games later, they bring in Stefan Baumgart, and it was a strange decision all around, because if you were going to make a managerial change, you would have just made it during the winter break. The new manager can get settled in, implement his tactics with the playing group, maybe sign some players that are more equipped to the style of play that the new manager wants to implement. And essentially what Stefan Baumgart has is this sort of zombie HSV team that is really built for Tim Walter football, and it doesn't really work. And the results show that they don't really work. And, being at the Volksparkstadion on Saturday night, the biggest sort of thing that I noticed is that as the game progressed, the energy within the stadium just disappeared, as if someone had sucked the life out of the joint. And the fans who at the start of the game, they had it's not over till it's over as a banner behind the goal. And that got wrapped up pretty quickly. And when Tom Reuter scored the goal, which Stefan Baumgart in his press conference said that there was a clear foul on the goalkeeper. And look, I was right next to the goal, and there wasn't a foul. I mean, the rose-tinted glasses were being worn in that conference, but they had the man advantage in that game as well. Holtby got sent off for a double yellow within the space of 3 minutes, and they never looked like scoring. It was just aimless crosses into the box, and hope that Glatzel or Nemeth, who Nemeth himself can't buy a goal. And it was like, well, what are you going to do? And it's just, Yeah, look, they look mentally destroyed as a team, and I would expect that in the summer that there are going to be some wholesale changes. I think Jonas Boltz, who's been there for 4 seasons now as their sporting director, they've got one of the biggest budgets in the league, and to be frank, his role seems untenable in my opinion. I don't really think he should be in a position to lead the team in the future. They need a really hard reset. I probably wouldn't bring Stefan Baumgart back either. They're going to lose a bunch of players. I would say guys like Ludovic Reis, Laszlo Benes, Robert Glatzel, maybe Daniel Hoyer Fernandez as well. And to be honest, it's they need a serious reset because they want to do it a certain way. And for 6 seasons, it hasn't worked. And it's clear that they need a new direction. They need new voices, and essentially entering a 7th season in the Zweite Bundesliga, it needs to be a complete restart. And whoever they decide to go with in the summer, should they make those changes, they need to back, and it can't go back to what they've been doing previously, which is those manager gets 1 season, they don't get promotion, then they get the sack.
Yeah, exactly. Well, good time for us to pick up a couple of questions that are starting to come in. So I want to fire these your way, Matthew. One in from one of our regular viewers, Moritz, who, of course, is a very strong FC fan, saying, "Hi, Matthew. Are you excited for FC Köln to be joining you in 2.Bundesliga as obviously their result at the weekend didn't put them in a very strong position, so they also look set to be automatically relegated. There's still obviously time, but it's looking quite clear now how obviously we're going to kind of talk about relegation and how teams might get on, but will that be a good thing for the league in general?"
Yeah, it's just another big name to add to what will be an extensive list of big teams. Schalke hopefully will still be there. Hamburg will be there. Hanover's still got some pretty decent size, and I think it'll be really interesting because it's not going to be particularly easy, given that they've still got the transfer ban, and it's they will lose some players. That's definitely going to be pretty evident. And just not being able to do much in terms of squad building. Will Timo Schutz be the coach for the Zweite Bundesliga? We don't really know. So, look, it's going to be tough regardless of what they go with. I think they might have a tricky first season. And typically, Köln are a classic yo-yo club. They have those seasons where they get relegated, but their stay in the Zweite Bundesliga is often quite temporary. But, it'll be cool. I'm sure for a lot of fans of many clubs, they'd be excited to head to the Rhein-Energie Stadion and just another stadium that fits 50,000. And if it helps improve the attendance numbers, as we've seen this season, there's been a few match days where the Zweite Bundesliga has outdone the Bundesliga, then, we're all for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for that question, Moritz. Let's pick one up from Ballum. The question on everyone's lips, of course, is will Hamburg ever leave Bundesliga, the Zweite Bundesliga? How many more goes do you think it's going to take them?
Well, given that I've done the podcast every year that they've been in the Zweite Bundesliga, I can imagine Hamburg fans are probably happy if the podcast goes away. So it depends. It depends on what they do with the squad. Depends what they're going to do managerial wise, and it's really a difficult question because I think for the past 6 seasons, we could all be forgiven for thinking this was going to be the year. But whether it's the start of the new year or it comes April, typically is when they tend to fall apart, excluding that 1 year where they made it all the way to the playoff against Hertha. It's going to be really difficult. So, hopefully next year, because to be honest, they've got first division fans there. I thought the atmosphere, especially in the early stages in the pre-game, they've got a great fan base. It's just that they have a team that constantly lets them down. Seeing fans leave early was quite understandable, to be honest, because I think 6 years of this hell, I think a lot of them would call it, is just not acceptable. So I hopefully for their sake, I think it would be good to see them up because they are one of those traditional clubs that with a lot of history. And yeah, I think they, it's not enough to say that they're too good for the Zweite Bundesliga, because the last 6 seasons have showed that in fact they're not.
This is very true. Before we go on to another question, Matthew, can you just talk us through your epic journey around Germany? Because we were just chatting off air, because obviously the number of times that we've actually done this show, we've been calling over to you in the morning, usually the early hours as well. So it's nice that we get to do it on a par, obviously, in terms of just one hour aside from each other in the evening. So it sounds like you've had an absolutely epic trip around Germany.
Yeah, it's been incredible. It was something that I've planned for quite a while, and look, ideally I would have loved to have done it years earlier, but schedules and finances and all kinds of other, COVID happened as well, and it's been pretty incredible. I think I've seen some pretty awesome games since I've been here, including the Klassiker. Just the second day I was in Germany, and seeing Dortmund win in Munich in the league for the first time in a decade. Was in Mainz the week after, which was really it was a surprise in terms of atmosphere, and just the pre-game stuff is really cool. All the vendors around the stadium, and there's a really good atmosphere there. And then was in Gelsenkirchen for Schalke Nuremberg, which was a great result. But it wasn't a particularly great game to watch, but it was a necessary result for the Royal Blues. And then I was in Leverkusen for the title-winning game, which was just an incredible atmosphere and truly an unbelievable experience, and one that I'll never forget, in the sense that, I don't think many of us had Leverkusen winning the league at the start of the season. And when I planned the trip, it was just a case of wanting to see this Leverkusen team in person after seeing them so often on TV in Australia. And they were every bit as impressive as I thought they were going to be. And then, this week I was at the Volksparkstadion for Kiel and Hamburg. And then the following day I was in Hanover for Hanover St. Pauli. And to be honest, a bit too cold up in the north. It was, below 5. And for someone like myself who doesn't get the cold weather that often, it was, could have used a heater or many more. To be fair, I've had many more layers. I would have looked like the Michelin Man, so it wouldn't have been, or at least it would have been easy to spot on the TV. That's for sure.
To be fair, we do have some pretty weird weather going around the Bundesrepublik at the minute. Yeah, at the moment, I don't know what's happened. Like, Matt, you were probably here when it was 27, 28 degrees a few weeks ago. Yeah. And then this last 2 weeks, it's absolutely freezing. It's Baltic at the minute. Yeah. It was the same, because we were at a couple of games as well over the weekend at Dusseldorf and Ulm in the third league, Ulm Regensburg. Yeah. And it was absolutely freezing. I was like, this is not April, literally.
I mean, like the 2 games that I did, in Munich and Mainz, Mainz was like 25 degrees on an afternoon. It was absolutely perfect. It was just sublime. And in Munich, it was in the mid 20s. And it was just, who took the sun away? Gru took the moon, and I guess someone has taken the sun. So would like to see it a few more times before I leave.
Yeah, it's grim up north, as they say. Yeah.
That's true for England as well, to be fair.
Yeah. Which other games are you going to, by the way, Matt? Have you got any more planned over the next?
So it's probably just going to be one more, and that will be Hertha and Hanover on Friday night. So,
okay.
Wanted to check out the Olympiastadion, and of course it's a Zweite Bundesliga game. So, probably going to check that one out, and then pretty much after that we prepare to pack and get ready to go home.
Amazing. Cool. Sounds like an epic trip. Absolutely. Very, very jealous myself. Okay, we'll just pick up one more question, then we'll a couple actually others that we might check on, and then we'll move on to talking about some of the individual stars that have lit up the division so far this season. So I just wanted to pick up this question because we couldn't not mention Kaiserslautern for dear old Peter. What's happening with Lautern? I mean, they're looking in a great deal of trouble right now. Are they going to escape the drop, or is it going to be back to the three Liga?
It's not looking good. It's 1996 all over again for them. So In 1996, they won the DFB Pokal, beating Karlsruhe, but they were also relegated from the Bundesliga. Look, they've made a string of really bad decisions that have unsurprisingly backfired over the course of the season, including Demetrius Gramotzis to replace Dirk Schuster, which really didn't work at all. And, they obviously went for a name in Freedom Funkel, and it really hasn't worked. They just aren't equipped at this state. And it goes back to the what I mentioned earlier, which is that how difficult the second season can be for teams who have gained promotion the previous season, and Kaiserslautern are finding that out. And, you look at the other teams that gained promotion, Braunschweig, at their current state, they will probably survive. But Kaiserslautern, it looks really improbable. I haven't seen enough from the change with Funkel to suggest that they are in a position to turn it around. So I would say at the moment, they will be in the bottom three. Osnabrück will definitely go down. I think I'm pretty comfortable in saying that. But I think you're looking at Kaiserslautern, and it could be any of your Wiesbadens or Hansa Rostocks in that mix. I mean, it's open season, and one win could really change the fortunes of either team. And I don't have high hopes of Kaiserslautern surviving at the moment.
Yeah, it does sound and look pretty grim for Kaiserslautern. I must admit, I'm tracking as much as I can of them and Nuremberg most weekends for Peter and Mark's sake. We can maybe talk a little bit about Nuremberg in a little while. But yeah, some great questions in there. So thank you to everyone that's asked them. Moritz also mentioning that, well, there is a chance that we could see a Rhine derby between Köln and Dusseldorf. But yeah, chances are that Köln might, they'd be very happy if they got that playoff place, I think, to be honest. So we'll see about that one. But yeah, fingers crossed for you, Moritz, in particular. Right then, so yeah, Mark, I'll hand over to you to ask Matthew about a couple of the standout players that we've seen so far in the Zweite, because I think you may well like to mention one of your boys as well in this.
Yeah, definitely. Probably the only good thing that's happened to the FCN, especially since the Rückrunde started, let's be honest. Yeah, for my boys, FC Nuremberg, obviously it has been that man, Can Ozun, who's been the star. I mean, until the last few weeks anyway, where his form has also kind of nosedived a little bit. But obviously he's been linked with a lot of clubs, hadn't he, in the Bundesliga? Obviously he was even linked with the BVB, Borussia Dortmund, as early as January. And a lot of people seem to think that he is on Dortmund's radar for a 10 to 12 million euro transfer. I mean, from what you've seen, Matt, do you believe that he'd be good enough to make the step up yet? Or do you think it might be a case that he goes and then gets loaned back maybe to this Zweite Bundesliga? Or just let me know your thoughts, because, I mean, the Nuremberg fans love him, but yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely on the move. From what I've read, it's Eintracht Frankfurt is where he will go. So he'll join Nathaniel Brown in heading to Frankfurt next season. Yeah, I think he is the real deal. There obviously are some things that he can improve on, especially defensively. Awareness is something that Christian Fiel in particular has over the last few weeks been very critical of. He was very blunt with his assessment in the defeat against Schalke on Can Ozun. And look, you just got to remember he's still a kid. He's obviously going to develop, and to be honest, without Ozun, without Brown's development, Finn Jeltsch as well, Nuremberg would be so firmly in this relegation battle right now. Like, it's not. It's actually they struck gold on three really talented young players, and yeah, like Ozun is a special player, and will require nurturing, and hopefully we are going to see him at the Euro as well for Turkey. So that will be really cool. Hopefully he gets a look in, and we actually get to see him on a big stage, because on the ball, he's very talented. And even a great example in that was in the Paderborn game, where the Okanuki goal, which was given for offside, and it was extraordinarily tight. That ball was sumptuous and put in a position where only Okanuki could really make the most of it. And yeah, I think he's I would be surprised if we see him in the Zweite Bundesliga again. It only happens if Frankfurt feel he's not ready. But I like to think that, give him an opportunity, and I think he'll make the most of it.
Yeah, I think my personal favourite moment of him was the goal against Hansa Rostock. I don't know if you remember that one. I was right behind the goal in that one, and that was just an amazing strike. Yeah, from 30 yards, bottom of the edge of the area. It was a beautiful strike. But yeah, he's just been amazing, full stop, really. But it'll be sad to see him leave. But he could potentially generate some much needed profit for the FCM because they just simply don't have the budget these days. I mean, they often have to go for young players, and obviously sometimes it comes good when you get the likes of Nathaniel Brown and the likes of obviously Chanozun as well. But a lot of these youngsters, they're not all to that kind of standard. But like a lot of Nuremberg fans are hoping that they will be able to generate a little bit of profit on the back of that and at least bulk up the squad. Get a more proven striker than Anderson because he's not really done it in the Runde either. In parts a little bit, but I think hopes were quite high for him when he signed initially. But
I think on the Anderson point, it's just a system fit. He doesn't really fit this team or the way Christian Fiel wants them to play. He has proven at this level with Union Berlin, and he had his moments at Köln, and you have to remember, like he's prior to signing with Nuremberg, he'd missed a significant amount of time with injury, and it's very rare that you see guys who make the jump to a team during the winter break actually, especially like a striker, hit the ground running. It's just very rare. And I like Sebastian Anderson. I just don't like him on this team. I think it just doesn't fit, and it's pretty clear that he's really only going to work in this team if Nuremberg are down. You bring him on as a sub, as a last gasp hit and hope. But they're talking about Nuremberg in general. It is going to be a really difficult summer for them. I much like in the talk with Jonas Bolt, I would say Dieter Hecking is another individual who was clearly on the hot seat entering the season, and I would argue that he hasn't really done himself any favors throughout the season, and it's clear that they could use a fresh voice, a different direction, and ideally a sporting director who has the same vision that Christian Fiel has, because it's clear that they're not really on the same page. This squad seems a little bit too comfortable within itself. A lot of the same guys have been here since that weird Weinziel few months, and Robert Klaus, and it's another club that could use a reset. But I guess you don't really have the ability to go full scale like Hamburg can, especially if you're a team that over the past couple of seasons has been fighting to avoid relegation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on the Dieter Hecking. I think he's had his time now, basically. And personally, I'm a big fan of Fiel, actually. Like early on in the season, I think the football was better than, since I've been a fan, it was the best football I'd ever seen from FC Nuremberg, no question. Like the football was great. It was just that at that time, they didn't have the striker, so I understand why they brought in Anderson, because I think Okanuki has quality, but he just doesn't finish. That's the problem with him. Like, he misses a lot of chances. But the general football, the likes of Goller was fantastic early on. Schleimer was fantastic, but the form has just dropped off, basically. But I agree with you that I'm a fan of sticking with Fiel for another year, because I think he's got a great philosophy, he plays good football, but they just don't have the players, basically. And the squad is very mixed, because they really do have some very talented players at the club. But I agree, there's something missing behind the scenes. Maybe it is Hecking that's the problem. Maybe it's some of the other room staff guys. But yeah, it's certainly been another pretty grim season for the FCN. So let's hope that maybe sometime in the near future we will actually finish in the top half again.
I mean, the first thing that Nuremberg need is to score a goal. So the last goal they scored was against Hertha. That was that Can Özün slalom. Since then, 10 goals conceded, none scored. And it's been a really tough stretch for FCN. And look, having seen them live in Gelsenkirchen, there were a lot of warning signs to suggest that, the alarms are sounding. And look, should teams in that bottom, from between 16 or even 17 to 13 start picking up points in the last couple of games, it could be a little bit of squeaky bum time for the last couple of games.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I said the other day to Peter, I don't think FCN is safe yet. I really don't. I think they were a little bit lucky with the fact that Kaiserslautern Wiesbaden finished a draw. I think if Kaiserslautern had won that, and also potentially if Hansa Rostock had beaten Magdeburg, we could have been in real trouble, to be honest. But I think as things stand, we should just be okay. But I think it's possible that they won't win again this season because, as you say, they're an absolute free fall. It's been poor for pretty much the whole Rückrunde, in truth. And yeah, the last decent performance was that game against Hertha Berlin, which was a good month ago now. So yeah. We need the season to end, and once again we're in a position where we're just hoping for the best, really, over summer. But
absolutely, and look, and the run home's really hard. Like there's Karlsruhe, Fortuna Düsseldorf, Elversberg, and Hamburg. So that's a tough run, and
very tough.
It's I wouldn't be feeling too good because they've had over the last few weeks they've had the winnable games, and they've fallen by the wayside.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Well,
go on, Rory. You can ask a few more about some of the other players that I kind of scratched over a bit.
It's all right. We have to make sure there's time for Nuremberg, of course. So standout players, other of course than some bright sparks from Nuremberg. Very typically, and maybe not the best way of doing it, I just picked out a couple of the players that have been doing well from a goal scoring point of view. So obviously, you've got Tabakovic, who's got obviously the leading goal scorer in the division, obviously for Hertha with 21 goals, and we've already mentioned Solis as well. And I think one other player that's really stood out for me is Laszlo Benes for Hamburg. Not only has he got a lot of goals, so 13 goals, he's got 11 assists as well. So those players and any others that you want to pick out, Matthew, that have been real superstars in the division.
It's tricky because there's so many, and it's hard to nail down one. I mean, if you were talking about Hertha, you'd talk about Fabian Riese. The team's really built around him, and I remember a few weeks ago, a journalist from Kicker asked the question about footballing identity for Hertha, and Paul Dardai walked out of the press conference and left Fabian Riese all on his own with the press officer. But he's been incredible for them. He's been one of the top signings for the season. Just his intensity. That's what I'm really looking forward to seeing him play on the weekend, because he could definitely make the jump to the Bundesliga. But he signed that extension a few weeks ago to stay in the capital. And similar to like Irvine, if there was like a club that really fitted a person's personality, and in the short time I've been in Berlin, I would definitely say that those two, the club and the player, are very much a match made in heaven. So yeah, Fabi Riese has been fantastic. I can see in the comments, Moritz asked about Jonas Urbig, someone I really rate highly. I would have said his Hinrunde was fantastic. His Rückrunde has been okay. Granted, the defense that he's been dealt with over the past few months has been nothing short of awful. But he's obviously on loan from Köln, which is, look, he could, should Köln get relegated, I would think if Marvin Schwaber isn't part of the plans, I would think he would be the number one for next season. But I don't have any information on that. I just know that Urbig will be returning on loan, and I would say that Köln will be trying to keep all the players that they've got out on loan for next season. Look, I like Urbig. I think he's really good. Asan Drogo from Schalke. I know he's missed a good chunk of the season because of injury when he was with the U17 team. He's really special, and he's quite a unique player for his size. And I think what really showcased his abilities was the goal against Hanover, where he won possession at the near side and just worked his way individually through the defense and put a brilliant goal past Ron Robert Zieler. So he's another super talent. Probably won't see him in the Zweite Bundesliga again, to be honest. And and that's for good reason. He's really good. You look at guys like Tom Reuter as well, who's on loan from Dortmund. There's a lot of discourse on whether he should start at right back next season, or should Dortmund go all in for Ian Maatsen from Chelsea, who's been on loan. And I think the one thing that Reuter really needs to work on is his defensive work. Forward of the ball, he's fantastic. He gets forward with great purpose and desire, and he's great at putting a ball in the box. But defensively, there's a lot of work that needs to go into to making him a bit more of a complete player. Look, there's so many, really. I mean, it's almost, especially this season, there's been a lot of great young players. Paul Varner as well at Elversberg. He's on loan from Bayern. He's been really good for them. I thought he was fantastic on the weekend against Schalke. Look, I would say that this season has been really cool, not only because there's been a ton of massive crowds and big clubs, but also lots of young players who have been seeking minutes from their parent clubs and being able to make the most of them. So it's been really exciting overall. And I think a lot of the guys, a good chunk of the guys that we've seen in the Zweite Bundesliga, it won't be long until we see them as mainstays in the Bundesliga. Yeah,
really exciting stuff, and very much looking forward to seeing who does make the step if they do in the summer. So we'll just turn our attention just towards the end of this chat and recording in regards to teams coming down into the Zweite. So naturally, it looks very set that Darmstadt will be one season and back. Cologne look likely as well, and then we've got this real big queue of teams that we really don't know what's going to happen with that playoff spot. We've talked about how well equipped Kiel and St. Pauli might be to cope with the Bundesliga. What do we think is going to happen to the likes of Darmstadt and Cologne? We see squads reset sometimes when they go down divisions, or they keep the faith and try and get a bit of stability. Are we going to see a bit of consistency maybe from a Darmstadt point of view, and maybe teams like Cologne might get torn apart a bit more, do we think? Or Matthew, do you see it being the opposite way around maybe?
It's really hard to say. I mean, Darmstadt are clearly preparing for next season. They announced last week that they've got a new sporting director in Paul Fernie, who was head of football at Wien Wiesbaden, someone who's scouted for teams like Leeds and Blackburn Rovers and is pretty well travelled. He was working at New York Red Bulls in the mid part of the 2010s. So someone with a lot of experience and to get him in early to sort of build, shape what their squad could look like for next season. I would say that there's probably a few players that they will lose in the summer. Guys like Matthias Honsack, for example, will be someone that will command a bit of interest. Someone like, maybe Christoph Clara, who signed from Dusseldorf in the summer. It is going to be a really interesting one because, they're going to stay with Thorsten Lieberknecht, it looks like. He's got a contract until 2027. A decent Zweite Bundesliga manager. He's gained promotion with Darmstadt, of course, and Eintracht Braunschweig. So, I think Darmstadt will be sort of like a mid-table team. It'll take a few seasons for them to get back up again. It's typically the way for clubs like Darmstadt, your Fürths in that regard. For Köln, of course, they've got the transfer ban, so it's going to be a little bit tough. They'll look at the guys that they're bringing back on loan. Have to look at their youth system, see what they've got there, and try and figure out what is going to be the best course of action going forward. It's kind of a tricky one. I think, both teams really need to take a long-term approach to it, because I don't think realistically it's going to be a case of them being one and done and back in the Bundesliga next season. And given the clubs that are already in the Zweite Bundesliga and the potentially really interesting clubs that we haven't seen in the Zweite Bundesliga, clubs like maybe Prusch and Munster, both clubs who gained promotion from the Regionalligas last season, and potentially one of Jan Regensburg or Dynamo Dresden, who sacked Markus Anfang on the weekend. That Drittliga race is pretty wide open. yeah, I mean, at both ends, I think Köln and Darmstadt won't have it their own way. And if they make the mistake that some clubs tend to make when they come back down, which is they think they'll cakewalk it, well, they'll have another thing coming.
This is very true. So yeah, that will be really interesting. I think the last point for us really to look at, which we kind of touched upon a little bit earlier on, is the playoff match. And we've talked about Fortuna a little bit, and Harrisval maybe still just about being in the mix, but it'll take a lot for them maybe to turn out Dusseldorf in third. Mark, first of all, who do we? From a Bundesliga point of view, if Bochum come third bottom, so 16th, I think that opens the opportunity for the likes of Fortuna the most, versus if a Mainz end up in there, or even a Wolfsburg. They're not. Wolfsburg aren't exactly pulling up trees, but the squad that they have, on paper, with Hasenhüttl as well, in theory, with some new ideas and the players playing for him, you think that the best way to have a Zweite Bundesliga and having a third promoted side is probably going to be via maybe Bochum coming in that spot.
Yeah, definitely. I think the first thing you've got to remember is that the Zweite Liga sides have a really poor record in this playoff as well. Let's be honest now, guys. Obviously last year it always looked a little bit one-sided with the 6-1 win for Stuttgart over Hamburg, but in the previous years, there were some ties that you thought, probably the Zweite Liga side was maybe even borderline favourite as well. I'm thinking about the likes of when Kiel played Köln. I felt as though Kiel had a really good chance that time. They won the away leg and then got battered in the home leg, which was a little bit bizarre. Similar story as well when Hertha played Hamburg as well. And obviously, Hamburg won in the Olympiastadion, but then lost at home. So this is becoming like a bit of a bogey kind of tie for the Zweite sides. I don't think, in my opinion, the quality difference between, say, like a Dusseldorf and a Bochum isn't that much, really. I think there is probably a bit of a quality difference, but it's not like astronomical. And I think, yeah, if it is Bochum, then I will give Dusseldorf a chance, definitely. But a lot of it, in my opinion, it comes down to the form of the Bundesliga side too. I think last season, obviously, Stuttgart were really firing on all cylinders under Hoeneß, weren't they? They were not the third worst team in that league last year. So I think Hamburg got a little bit unlucky, in truth. But if it is Bochum, then definitely Dusseldorf or even Hamburg, if things work out that way, would have half a chance against this Bochum side. I think, the fact that it would be a derby as well, a fierce derby between those two sides, I think would filter in as well. There'd be two great atmospheres at the games. But yeah, it's about a Zweite Liga side getting over that hoodoo, isn't it, really? Obviously, Union Berlin, I don't know if you remember, guys, were the last team to do it, and I believe 18-19. Which was obviously before COVID, before a lot of things. Yeah. So basically it was a good 5-6 seasons ago. And I think before that, it was about 7 or 8 years before that as well, I believe. Can you remember, Matt, who the last team to do it was?
Fortuna Düsseldorf. Yeah. They beat Hertha. And that was... that went down well.
Yeah, exactly.
It was Fortuna. So only 3 teams have gained promotion. The other one was Nürnberg. I think it was Nürnberg. I want to say
it was. I think Nürnberg played Augsburg in one of the early times. Yeah, I believe. Yeah. Nürnberg lost. I think Nürnberg lost to Augsburg.
Nürnberg beat Cottbus, I think it was.
Was it? It must have been a while back now.
Yeah, because Augsburg lost in the playoff and then they gained automatic promotion the following season.
Yeah, that was it. Nürnberg played at Augsburg, but Nürnberg was that was it. Yep. Yeah, but Nürnberg beat them that day. Yeah, one of few bright sparks in the last 12 years or so for the FCM. But yeah, definitely. It is definitely a bit of a hoodoo, isn't it? And it's going to be interesting. I always look forward to these playoff games. I think it's one of the real. It's such a buzz around, and so much lies on for both teams, really. Obviously for the Bundesliga side, if you get relegated from the Bundesliga down, you have to, your budget is massively short, basically. You've got a lot of players that are on relegation release fee contracts as well. We're going to see that with Köln as well. A lot of key players are going to leave basically on basically released from the contracts. The same will be with Bochum as well, I'm sure. So there's so much line on those games. And when you've got a massive club like Dusseldorf as well, one of the kind of big club, it's not really one of the big clubs, but it's a massive city as well. It's a city that probably needs a Bundesliga club, really, and it'll be a really interesting tie, that one, if it comes to fruition.
Yeah. Last question, I guess, with time. From a Svita point of view, Matthew, do we like the playoff system? Do we think it's unique? Do we think it's unfair? I mean, it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on what you think is going to be the future of this, really.
Well, I mean, the record suggests that it's a system that doesn't work. But then you can contradict yourself, because if you look at the Zweite Bundesliga and the Dritte Liga matchup, the Dritte Liga team more often than not has the successful record. So it does work, but it doesn't work at the same time. I would say that the gap between the Dritte Liga and Zweite Bundesliga isn't as big as the gap between the Zweite Bundesliga and the Bundesliga. So, you have to remember when Union gained promotion, they won on away goals. Heidenheim lost on away goals to Werder Bremen in the playoffs. And I think one that I felt that Heidenheim deserved promotion in, and put the spotlight back on the playoffs. And Hamburg could have beaten Hertha, and you go through all the hypothetical situations of, well, this could have happened and that could have happened, and the reality of the situation is that it's 2 extra games. It's good for the league financially. They're both very it's all beneficial in extending the lifespan of the league. So you can see why they do it. But overall, there's probably a better system. I would say, for me, 3 teams should go down, and that includes the Zweite Bundesliga, and then 3v4 in a playoff. You could either make that over 2 legs if you want to keep the 2-leg system, or for me personally, I feel like the best idea would be 1 game, neutral stadium, and winner takes all. I think that for me, I think that would be much more interesting. Has a real cup final feel to it. No team really has an advantage, but then the caveat of that is if one team is, say, head and shoulders above 4th, and then 4th gains promotion by winning that 1 game, then it just then you look at it and like, well, that's probably a bit unfair. So look, there's no perfect system. I think the system we currently have is the one that we'll have going forward. And, hopefully from a Zweite Bundesliga perspective, they can win the playoffs. But history suggests that it's pretty unlikely, but, never say never.
This is very true. That's basically everything that we wanted to fire your way this evening, Matthew. So we'll kind of bring it to a close. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on again to talk Zweite Bundesliga with you and everything else in between, listening about your amazing trip that you've had as well. So, I mean, all there really is to say is make sure that you do all the usuals. Right? Make sure you leave a thumbs up on the show. Obviously, if you're not watching this live, please do leave a comment. Let us know your reflections and what you think might happen with the title race and beyond. And make sure you press that thumbs up button. The red button to subscribe, rather. I'll leave the rest over to you, Mark.
Yeah, so if you enjoyed what you saw today, don't forget to check out our Twitter feed, well, X, I should call it nowadays, at @OverTheBarFB and at VillageFooty20. Don't forget that we're not only a YouTube channel as well nowadays, we are also a podcast, so we'll leave the link in the description for that. Don't forget to follow our podcast. And also Matt's as well, obviously the fantastic Zweite Bundesliga podcast. Don't forget to check that out. And as Rory said, keep helping us by subscribing. Leave your comments as well, because we want to know what you guys think about the Zweite Liga as well, what you've enjoyed, some of the players that you've enjoyed seeing, and all that kind of thing. But thanks again to Matt. It's always a pleasure to have you on for this show once a year. And we'll have to see what the rest of the season brings, won't we? But it was a pleasure. And myself and Rory will see you again on Thursday for the predictions ahead of match day 31. So see you all then, guys. Servus.